A lot of people say karateka or karateka. In Japanese, there's no stress on any syllable, so it would be karateka, something like that. I called it karateka, but I've since found out that pretty much everybody pronounced it differently. So however you pronounce it is fine. Don't feel bad. It's all good.
Damn it, Jordan! You had the opportunity to settle this decades-long debate once and for all, and you... Oh... It's like the debate over that animated image format on the internet. Obviously, everyone knows it's pronounced... Oh, come on! What's up, folks, and welcome to an Indie Retro Ramble Fusion. I've actually been quite excited to talk to you guys about this because it is... While it's not the first game that is signaling the significant shift that Digital Eclipse has been taking recently, it's the first one that was done entirely on their own, and it really, I think, better shows their future vision, and I'm really excited about it. So, this is the Making of Karateka. Yes, that's how I pronounce it. Deal with it. And it's the first in the new, what they're calling Gold Master series. So you may remember that a while ago, I covered Atari 50 on this channel, which was a largely fantastic collection that it's like playing a documentary, basically. It had a number of older and remastered games in it, but it also had a historical timeline that went through the various different stages that Atari as a company has been through up until around the 2000s or so, basically till the end of the Jaguar era. The Gold Master series is a much more concentrated version of that idea. So what this is it focuses exclusively on one classic game. And there are going to be a number of these that are all going to focus on different individual titles and doing a real deep dive on those involving the actual creatives behind them. And a lot of you who are watching this may not be old enough to remember Karateka, but I played it a bunch on multiple platforms, in fact, originally on my buddy's Apple II, and then later on my Atari 130XE. And it's a title that by today's standards looks very simple. It does. But it's really was formative and seminal to a lot of games that have come since. And Jordan Mechner, its creator, is actually a really fascinating guy. He's very creative, very smart, but he's very mild-mannered and humble, really. And he actually hasn't made that many games in his career compared to a lot of designers. But most of the major games that he has made have been incredibly influential. He made this, he made Prince of Persia, he made The Last Express, which is a little bit more of a sleeper hit, but many designers consider an absolute masterpiece. And he's now working on graphic novels and things like that. And this collection actually drove me to pre-order the English version of his graphic novel, which is kind of like a graphic novel memoir that's coming out next year. Looks really cool, and I'm looking forward to taking a look at that. But yeah, this focuses entirely on Jordan's life leading up to Karateka and talking about the whole story. He's very heavily involved with it, as is his father. And I'm gonna jump around here and just show you guys a little bit of what's in here. I don't want to spoil this thing. If you really are interested in Karateka, you should buy this because it's not only a good history lesson, this is an idea that needs support. Like, Digital Eclipse deserves to get support for this kind of thing. So there's some videos in it, as well as some interviews and a bunch of still art, and it very much mirrors the formula of Atari 50 in a good way. And it talks really in depth about Jordan and about the formation of the game. And like I said, it talks about his dad. His dad is a fascinating character. He's a very smart, sort of multidisciplinary person, but he's also a musician. And he didn't care about video games at all back in the day, but he saw that Jordan had taken a real fancy to them and said, I want to help my son realize his dream in any way I can. So he helped him with the early equivalent of motion capture that was done for this game. He actually did the music for various different versions of Karateka, and he was a very seminal part in the creation of this title, and it's really cool to see that story play out, because I didn't know that, even as a big fan of Jordan and of his games. So I'm not going to play these all the way through. You can see how the videos work. They have basic controls, but they work well. You can have subtitles on or off, which is very nice. You can pause things at any time. You can jump around. You know, standard video player, but it does a nice job. And there's a ton of photos in here. Jordan is one of those designers, kind of like Tim Kaine or some of these other guys, who kept meticulous notes of everything he did. So you're going to see in here not only a bunch of photos from his youth when he was learning, like right there, he was learning to program on his family's Apple II, but he has a whole bunch of images in here, prototype drawings, where he was prototyping his art, letters back and forth between publishers. There are prototype versions of a number of his games on here, and we will get to these. He actually had his old floppy disk with a bunch of his old prototypes. So there are versions of Karateka and some of his other games on here that you've never seen before because they were never released, because they were pre-release. They're in this collection. Every game as well that is in this collection, you can either play by yourself, you can watch somebody from Digital Eclipse, I assume, play it through. And the really cool part is that this has a really neat feature where, as you can see at the bottom there, when a game is along, so this was one of his earlier games, which was like a clone of Asteroids, you can just click the right stick and jump in exactly to the frame where the video was. That is the coolest thing. I think that's really neat. And I really love the way that works, and the fact that you can watch it and be like, yeah, I'd like to go in now, and you can just jump in there. So, and all of these games have some basic functionality. You can reset it, you can load in save states, which is nice. It shows the controls, which are rebindable, even in these old prototype emulations. Very nice, guys. I'm impressed by that. Good job. You have various different aspect ratios for the screen. You can have a scanline filter, an old school TV scanline filter on or off. You can change, at least on the Apple games, you can change the display type, because Apples were actually very limited in color back then. So you can change it. A lot of people use single color screens like white, phosphor, amber, or green. You have that option. And if the game has a border, you can turn that on and off. You know, it's not the most advanced suite of features ever, but in a collection like this, that's not what you're looking for, right? So that's pretty cool. And yeah, he has all of these different things, and they're scanned in super high resolution, so you can zoom in to read them if you want, and you can turn the caption off as well as the controls if you want a completely immersive experience. Very well done. And there's just tons of stuff in here. Jordan kept a journal as well, a personal journal, where he released some of the entries related to the development of Karateka. And you know, here's Death Bounce. This is a game that he tried to work on with a publisher that never ended up getting released, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. There's prototypes of that through here. There's some other proposals here. And the thing that you're going to find very fascinating about a lot of this stuff is that when Jordan came up with Karateka and worked on it, he was 18 and he was in college. And you're going to see a lot of letters like this between him and Broderbund Software, who was his publisher. And he is a very articulate, business-savvy guy at that young age. Like, you can tell how smart he was. Like, so many young people would see dollar signs in their eyes and just sign the most, egregious, horrible contracts possible back in the day, right? Because just to get famous, because that's what a lot of young people did who didn't know any better. Jordan did know better. And he has extensive back and forths with Broderbund about the development of the game and design decisions and all of these different elements. He took his game very seriously. And when you look at it, it's cool because he was not your stereotypical auteur. The stereotypical designer who's completely high on himself and refuses to listen to anyone or take any criticisms or do anything like that. And he's like, this is my vision, and if you can't see that, you're just an idiot. We've seen plenty of those people out there. And he's not like that at all. You'll see even the letters where he's pushing really hard and being a little bit aggressive, he's doing it not because he's being contradicted or because he believes, he does believe he's right, but not in an arrogant way. He's really doing it because he wants to make the best game he can make. And he's like, I'm fighting for this because I believe this is what needs to happen in order to make this game the best, so that I can be successful as a budding game designer, and so that Broderbund can be successful as well, so we can keep working together. It's really fascinating, the story behind this and what a smart guy Jordan is, and it's always been surprising to me. I'll play this video. So one of the things that Jordan is famous for is coming up with rotoscoping for video games. So one of the things that people loved about Karateka and later Prince of Persia was how fluid and almost realistic the animation was for such an early age in video games. And the way Jordan accomplished that was by using a video camera and filming members of his family actually doing the different character poses and transposing those frame by frame into the computer. He filmed these things as a reference and then hand did it. It's bonkers what he pulled off. And he goes into great detail about this here, talking with his dad and showing video clips and that. That's what makes this so fascinating. This is such a deep dive on a classic seminal title, and it goes into a level of detail that, yeah, only enthusiasts are going to be into. But if you're someone who still remembers Karateka fondly to this day, then this will probably interest you. And I really enjoyed going through this. It doesn't take super long, you know, especially if you can read fast like I can. It'll only take you a couple, 3 hours maybe to go through all the material. But that's a lot for one game. And all of it was interesting. None of it was boring. I read every single word that was in here. None of it felt like filler. None of it felt like padding. It all felt relevant and interesting. And yeah, it really impressed me. And they've hinted near the end of this that maybe they're going to do one on Prince of Persia in the future. As someone who put a lot of hours into the Prince of Persia series, yes, please. I would absolutely love to see that. So here's some of the Super 8 footage that he took doing this stuff, trying to show what, you know, taking the animation frame. So you're seeing a lot of running here because this is what they were trying to capture, right? And a lot of this is Jordan's dad. Because his dad, I came to learn after watching this, is just a super good dude. I like his dad. His dad's cool. And of course, though, you know, I'm going through all this. Like I said, I don't want to talk about a lot of this because I want you guys to see this for yourself. But, of course, you also have the game library. And this is where things are cool. So, you have multiple different versions of Karateka. Not all of them, but the majority of the important ones. The Apple II is the seminal one that it's known for, but there was also a Commodore 64 version, which personally I think is the best, even as someone who owned an Atari 8-bit and really liked it. There's the Atari 8-bit version, and these are the key things. These are new remastered versions of both this and Death Bounce, which was his unreleased title that Digital Eclipse did for the modern era. I will show you these, but I want to give you some context first. So yeah, as you can see here, all of the different prototypes are available that were for both Death Bounce and Karateka, all kinds of prototypes, and then his very early Asteroid clones, which were the first games that he made. And this stuff is all really cool. I already showed you the options that each one of them has. They've also got in a couple of these, which is cool. Let's go into the Apple II version. What's cool about this, too, is they added some neat little incentives to them. So in some of these games as well, there's the full original instruction manual, very nicely scanned in. Fantastic quality job. You can change the base control type, which is kind of cool, depending on different types of controllers that you have. So you have all these things, but in addition to that, some of these have things that have... So the Apple II was not a very powerful computer, and at least certainly not by modern standards. And Karateka, people who are frame rate snobs are going to be very triggered by that. This allows you to change things a little bit. You can also change the side of the floppy disk because there was a bone. I'm not going to spoil that, but there was a different thing on the other side of the disk. And yeah, you can put on an artificial frame rate enhancement. It's cool, but if you really want the game as it was originally intended, then you shouldn't do that. But you're going to see what I mean here. So I'm going to try to skip ahead here a little bit. I don't know if you can actually skip this intro or not. Oh yeah, the games have a rewind function too. So that's very good. Karateka was not a long game, but it was a very hard game. And that's a key thing that you have to be mindful of as well. So here we go. So yeah, and it played a little weird because you see the default Apple joystick didn't have wasn't centered. So there we go. It wasn't centered. So to change stance in this, you have a hostile and a non-hostile stance. And again, without spoiling things, that's critical for later. And so what you could do is to go into the non-hostile mode, you actually held the joystick up, and walking with the joystick held up with a modern joystick that centers itself is a little awkward. On the Apple II, the joystick stayed there, so it was a lot easier to do. So trying to walk non-hostile, playing these older versions is a little strange, because you've got to hold your analog stick up and to the right if you want to walk. Because as soon as you let it go to center, your character will go into fighting stance. So that's a little odd. I feel like maybe there's an alternative way to make that easier that I haven't seen yet, but that's a little odd, but you get used to it pretty quick. And like I said here, you can see how chunky this frame rate is. Yeah, Jordan was making a not very powerful system do some pretty amazing things for the time. So it is definitely a little tricky. But like I said, you can come in here if you like. You can turn on the enhanced frame rate, which I'm assuming just applies like a real-time, is either just putting a straight multiplier on the emulation, or maybe applying like a real-time overclock to the virtual Apple II that you're playing on here. I'm not sure how they're doing it, but it's not bad. But as you can see, it makes the game logic feel a lot faster too. Personally, I think this makes the game harder. So that's something to be mindful of. Like I said, this is not a long game, but it is a very challenging game, and it has almost a roguelike feel to it, in the sense that when you die in this game, you go back to the start. There's no checkpoints or anything like that unless you choose to use a save state. So this is, and it can do things like that. If you run up to a guy and don't stop in time, you just, and that's it. So, it's something to keep in mind there when you're playing that. But that's the way, back in the day, they didn't have the resources to make games long, so they had to make them hard. That's the way it worked. So yeah, these different versions are all the same game, but put together on different platforms, and they were all ported by a different person, but someone who, there are interviews with that person in here, and they actually take, you can tell that they took their responsibilities to that very seriously. And they were contracted to do a port, and they didn't just want to do, a quick and dirty job. They really wanted to make the games as good as they could be for the platforms they were on. And rather interesting that they were talking about how they much preferred working with the Atari 8-bit than the Commodore 64, because they said the Commodore 64 was a much messier system to port to, which I haven't heard that before for the most part. I've actually usually heard the opposite, so I thought that was kind of cool. Good stories in here about that kind of stuff, The Atari 8-bit's not too different, so I'll show you that later. And then, yes, we have the remasters. This, frankly, is really cool. So these were done in-house by Digital Eclipse with Jordan's blessing. Mike Micah, who's the president of Digital Eclipse, did most of the work on this one, as I understand it. Now, what's neat with this is that this has goals in it, and these are tied to achievements. So there are goals in the 2 acts of the game, plus plus bonus objectives. So you see I've got a few of them here. You can go through these. There's also developer commentary for this that you can turn on, so you can listen to them talk about how they make it as you play. There's a manual in this as well for this thing that talks about the basics there. Again, scan lines on or off. You can set the number of lives you have if you want. You can set how the HUD works. There's a decent number of options here. And as you're going to see here, it's just, they have sort of remastered, recomposed music. And obviously this is a modern version. So as you can see, very nice, very fluid animation, really nice frame rate, visual enhancements. It's got like, I don't know what graphical era to compare this to, because it's got nice pixel art in the back, and it's got a combo system, as you can see. It's got a nice pixel art in the back, but the animation feels almost PlayStation 1-y, or the characters feel almost PlayStation 1-like from that era. It's hard to say, but I really like it. There's been several indie games that have been done in this style the last little while, and it's very nice, and it really adheres and maintains the original artistic vision that Jordan had, but gives it that modern coat of paint, right? And I think it looks really good. And this is definitely the definitive way to play the game. It's got a nice, consistent frame rate, you know, and the controls are much more responsive. And this really is the way to play the game if you're gonna, you know, if you want to play it in the best way possible that is appreciable by modern players, I guess. You know, I grew up on playing this on the Apple II, and the horrific frame rate is something I was used to then, so it feels kind of authentic for me to do that, right? But I can't blame any modern PC player for firing that up and going, oh god, I can't do this. You know, so it's nice that you have the option for a more modern version that replicates everything about the original experience, so that you're playing the game the way it was intended and the way it was meant to be. But you know, like they didn't make a different game here. They just put a really nice modern coat of paint on an existing game. So that's really cool. I'm not going to get too far into this here, but really nice job. I think they did well on that. And in addition, they did a reimagining of Death Bounce as well, which was, again, the sort of arena shooter that Jordan made that never ended up getting released. So I won't talk a lot about this. Again, you'll want to see the origins and history of this in the game, but it's a twin-stick shooter, and it plays really well. It's got a neat little old-school pixel arcade look, but again, plays at a really nice fluid frame rate. The enemy sprites have been given, you know, a different treatment, so they look a little bit more modernized, but it maintains the challenge. And it has a high score table in it, and the factory high score on this is just as it was back in the day, which is that Jordan set a stupidly high factory high score. But you can beat that. There's no online leaderboards. That's a bit of an ass, considering this is the only game in the package that would really use online leaderboards. Yeah, it would have been cool, but yeah, who really cares, right? And there's goals associated with this one as well. You can see, which is kind of cool. And some of these are nothing to sneeze at. They're definitely tricky. Like that accuracy target and those bonus targets are tricky. And the combo system is not even explained in this manual here. It's something you have to figure out as you go. I think I know how it works, but nonetheless. But this plays really well. I actually like it. If like an indie game, if like a small indie dev had released this as like a, you know, there's been a lot of lately, I've covered some of them here, a lot of those small indie games on Steam that come out for like $5 that are like a modern interpretation of an old arcade concept, something like that. If an indie dev had released this exact thing under that motivation, I'd have covered it positively. That's the word I was looking for. I'd have covered it positively, and I'd said, yeah, this is good. This is worth $5 or whatever. So that it's just built into this package is really nice. But this is a game that totally could have been its own inexpensive standalone thing, and I would have enjoyed it. It's challenging. It's simple yet challenging, easy to learn, hard to master, and it's paced well, and you feel like you know, you enjoy it in that sort of arcadey way. So definitely approve of that. And yeah, you have all of his various different prototypes of both Karateka and Death Bounce. So it's really cool. Like, you can see the roots of the game in here. A lot of the base stuff in this is still the same. You know, his idea was pretty much the same through and through. It's just that you can see that like the animations and the cutscenes and stuff aren't as polished out. And he does change some of the way some of the mechanics works. You see the health bar works a little bit differently down here right now. Well, I boned that up, didn't I? And actually, it does perform better, the final version. This version actually has an even worse frame rate. So, but his vision was really fully formed before he made the first prototype, which I thought was very interesting. So he did a lot of, you know, he really had his idea, figured out from the beginning, which I think is really cool. So yeah, this is the original Death Bounce. As you can see, the controls for this way faster and less fluid. This is pretty dang hard. I mean, this game was hard to begin with, but yeah, now it's absolutely brutal. But this was a prototype, right? And that's what prototypes do. You start them up to learn and refine, and you go from there. So, really interesting stuff. And yeah, overall, I think this is a really cool package. I think it's a really cool experiment that I do hope works out for Digital Eclipse. I hope this sells well enough and that they've been able to structure their the business model around these, that they don't have to sell 1 million copies in order to be successful, right? As I understand it, they were pleased with how Atari 50 did. So I hope that continues here with this, and that they can do more things. I would love to see Prince of Persia, of course, and obviously I would love to see collections on games from other designers and other developers. I've no doubt they have a number of designers willing to work with them. They probably arranged all that before they even started making these, to be sure that they could easily get a good collection going. So I don't know what their planned release cadence is for this. I hope they're able to do it fairly on the regular. And I'm very interested to see. I mean, there's so many things they could do, right? So many different things. And there's so many classic games out there that deserve this kind of interactive documentary treatment, because I love video game documentaries. But if you're talking about a playable medium, what better way to document something than to let you play it, right? And that's what they're doing here, and I love it. I hope this continues. So thank you guys very much for watching. I do appreciate it. That is the Making of Karateka. Everything is out all over the place now. If you have an interest in gaming history, or if you just remember this series fondly, I really recommend checking it out. There's a lot of great stuff here, and I do believe it's important to understand how our favorite mediums and entertainment mediums come to be. You know, I think learning how things are made, not becoming an expert in them, but learning how things are made is important, and it helps really frame a lot of the things that we enjoy, and I think that's very valuable. So yeah, again, thank you everybody for watching. I do appreciate it. If you liked what you saw here, please do all the normal YouTube things. Those really do help the channel out a great deal. And listen, leave a comment down below and tell me what other games from Digital Eclipse you would like to see get this treatment, because I know they're looking for fan feedback, and they want to know people that they can approach with this. So I can, you know, I'll send, once I see some comments there, I will send them a link to this video and go, look, people are responding. So please leave a comment there and tell me. Doesn't matter, any games, any historical games from any developers you'd like to see get this kind of treatment. I would love to know that. And as always, you can follow me over at twitch.tv/pxabstraction for multiple variety streams a week. I cover other indies and retro stuff there, including games that are better suited to streaming than YouTube. We have a fantastic community over there, and I would love to see you be a part of it. Thanks again, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video. You folks have yourselves a good one. Take her easy.